Hello, this Sunday on January 9th, 2011 has been designated for centuries in the Christian tradition as the baptism of Jesus. It's the time when we commemorate when he was about 30 years old, when he was taken down into the Jordan River by John the Baptist and immersed. And his baptism was given, and he heard the great voice from heaven saying, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Well, this was not the first time that such a story has been known in history. In fact, similar stories go back at least 12,000 years to the times of ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, there was an avatar, kind of a god-man teacher, which was, in their mythology, sent from the heavens, from the sun, to teach them the way of liberation. His name was Horus. And when Horus was around 30 years old, he too underwent a baptism in the river. The name of his baptizer was Anup the baptizer. And when Horus came up out of the water, he too heard a voice saying, "You are my beloved chosen one, in whom I am well pleased," complete with the dove. And wouldn't you believe, but a few years later, Anup the baptizer was arrested and he was decapitated as John the Baptist was himself. So this story is not new. In fact, you can read very similar versions of it 6 or 7 different times in surrounding countries, and many believe that probably the story that we have came from the time of Judaism in Persia. Be that as it may, what then really does this story mean? What does baptism mean? It simply means to be immersed, baptizo in the word which is used here, to be dipped, to be cleansed, or to immerse. The ideas of washing, of being immersed into our mission for life. You've all heard that phrase. His first few years in that congregation was quite a baptism by fire, and we know what that means, some of us who have been pastors over the years. So what does it mean for us today? Well, it means for us today, most of us who perhaps are hearing this, have been baptized, or at least have heard about it, that our baptism means, among other things, that God, first of all, is very, very well pleased in us, in who we are as his created sons and daughters. He's delighted in you. He's delighted in me. He made us this way. Now, this is not to be confused with the body and all those imperfections that we get in a constant effort to try to judge what is right or what is wrong. But I'm talking here about our divine essence, or some call that divine spark within us, who we really are, that Christ self, that higher self, that true self, the God within us, that is perfect, as one with God. And he is absolutely delighted with that in us and wants us to remember it, and to use that as the very call for our mission in life, to tell others of that marvelous story. Now, a lot of us in the church tradition, and especially in the Calvinistic Reformed tradition, don't really look at it that way, but we see ourselves in our original state as totally depraved, just totally lost, no good. I hate it when I hear that. I cringe. When I think of that, I just think it's a lot of rubbish, because people are confused, all of the bodily imperfections and its mortality with that within us which is eternal. We talked about that previously, I think, last week. I would say over my career of administering baptisms, quite a few hundreds of them in my career, that most of the parents who came to me asking for baptism, when I would ask why, their initial response would be to save them from hell, to cleanse them from their sins. And I think, oh, what a terrible concept to be given. When we first moved to Hamburg area 35 years ago, in the first year, none of our 4 children were baptized, and my oldest daughter came home and she was crying one night, and she said her friends told her because she wasn't baptized, that if she died she would go to hell. Well, my wife and I were not raised in the tradition that baptized children, but we certainly got our children baptized. In fact, it was on this very Sunday, the baptism of Jesus, we did it so she could assure her friends that she was indeed saved and cleansed of all her sins. You know, what rubbish when you think about it. What it really is to be is a beginning of awareness of who we are as God's children, that God is pleased with us. I was on a train a few years ago going from Glasgow to Oban in Scotland, and a little girl kept poking her head around a seat behind me and looking at me, and the mother would pull her back and say, "Don't do that, don't bother that man." The little girl would do it again, and the mother would say, "Bad girl, bad girl." One time she said she was such a bad little girl she should have been a boy, and at that time I just about had enough. But oh, what a terrible script and indoctrination that we often give, not only to ourselves but to our children. Now, in some of the ancient Eastern African nations, before they were almost obliterated by the missionary movement and the colonization from Europe, when a woman in those nations discovered that she was pregnant, she would sing a song. She'd make up a song, and it would grow with the child as it grew in her womb. And when the child was born, the first thing she did was sing the song to the baby. And she sang it the whole baby's life that she was alive. She sang that song. She taught the song to the child. I like to think it was something like, "You are brave, you are wonderful, I'm so proud of you. The divines love you," and whatever words they use. And when later the child died, it was even sung at the child's, demise. A lifelong of remembering the song. The song I would like for you and I to remember and to teach our children as good models is that we are loved. God is pleased and delighted with us and wants us to know that and to simply share it in humility and in power and liberation with those around us. The other thing about baptism is that we use water. Some of us, had it poured on us. In my case, I went right into a big tank and was fully immersed, in my mission or in my awareness. But it's really a beginning of awareness of my Christ self. And it's so important that parents realize that and teach that to their child, teach it to themselves. And that water is able, like water itself is a symbol, to adapt to anything in life. You know that about water. It adapts to shallow, adapts to depth, it adapts to what is rough and smooth and young and old, to temperatures of cold. It just crystallizes until things warm up again. And when it gets too hot, it just evaporates into the air and adjusts itself and comes back and it's water again, and just everything it adapts to. In the East, they see ourselves as part of the drop of the ocean, which always is adapting to the waves and the storms and the calmness. Some describe it as that we're like a stream, always trying to find and remembering that we're connected with the sea. As much as Jesus taught, that we're a part of the vine, we're one of those grapes on the vine that goes back to the main root of God. Well, we're water in the same way. And wherever we are and whatever our situation, we can learn to adapt and be at peace in our minds. Whether it's hot or cold, light or darkness, pleasure or pain, we always can remember that a part of us abides the same eternally. A couple of years ago, we had a man come to our congregation and he sang a song called Water. I've become such a fan of his songs. His name was Daniel Namad. And this is the song that he sang for us that has been in my heart and head ever since, called Water. I've seen my share of struggles when I thought that I knew best, when I sailed through the storm instead of stopping to rest. But it always seemed the hardest when I made up my stubborn mind. Well, I'm changing my ways this time. Wanna be like water coming down the mountain into shadowy canyons, flowing from pool to stream. Wanna be like water, head uphill no more. I am bound for the sea. Have you ever seen an eagle head straight into the wind? He doesn't pick a fight, spreads his wings and just gives in. And in the end he always makes it home just fine. I guess he knows that every storm subsides. Wanna be like water coming down the mountain